hello everyone. This is my talk, and my name is Gabriel. I'm a senior Android engineer for almost 10 years, and I was working in different environments. I worked in software houses, in product companies, with small and big projects, but I have never worked with multi-platform. So if seeing this topic, you wonder, oh no, there will be another guy that is trying to force me that multi-platform is the best. You're very wrong. I'm not that guy, because I've never done a multi-platform ever. Like 1 year ago, something happened, and two things actually, two applications. The first one is the bus ride. The bus ride is the company I am working for 1 year. When I joined Busride, we have a very small but meaningful problem to solve. We have shitty apps. And the first problem why it was shitty was because it was really legacy code. And we have no iOS engineer in there. So the problem was how to create the app, the better app, that will work on both platforms. And yeah, I was hired as Android engineer, and I was like, let's write it natively, please. I don't want to do any multi-platform. But actually, that was something that we did. We created a multi-platform app in Flutter. And guess what? The second one, the WeSketch, is my own product, and it's created in Kotlin Multiplatform. So for around a year, my career was shifted from like native engineer to somebody who wrote 2 applications and both in prod with amazing results. Like maybe not WeSketch because it's like hundreds people are using it, but that's something, right? But for this production application, the bus ride is 40K users, like daily users. It's not like something impressive. It's not Facebook. It's not like Google who have like multiple millions of users. It's kind of basic, but 40K for someone who never wrote any multi-platform code was pretty impressive. So what do you think, what we are gonna to do today? Yeah, we're gonna compare 2 apps, like 40K to 100, but why not, right? So seems legit. I think that's worth to do. But before I will start, some disclaimers. First one, I think I've mentioned. That I wrote the second app, the WeSketch, in Kotlin Multiplatform. And what does it mean? When I will be using the Kotlin Multiplatform, that means I mean Kotlin Multiplatform together with Compose. How many of you have heard about Compose? Okay, impressive. So for those who do not know Compose, it's like Swift UI for Android, basically. But Compose is now multi-platform. We can build UI in declarative manner, similar as Swift UI, for both Android, iOS, and web. Like, that's 3, okay. And why it's a big deal? Why I trying to point explicitly that I'm using also Compose multi-platform? Because I've built those both apps with shared UI, and that's something that really matters here. And what also matters is Compose multi-platform is the fact that it's still in beta for the iOS. It's stable for Android, but a beta for iOS. That's very important. Second disclaimer is that I'm native Android engineer. Does it mean I am biased? Absolutely not, right? Obviously, short a small joke, but yeah, I was Android engineer for like 10 years, and Kotlin Compose is something that is really important and feel really close to me. So I might be running some jokes around, other platforms, etc. Don't mad at me, because one thing that I love more than Kotlin is hating React Native. So we don't wanna talk about React Native today, okay? But to not drop, that bold statement, I will spend like a bit time to explain why. I do not believe that React Native compared to Flutter and to Kotlin Multiplatform is like something worth exploring right now. It feels kind of outdated. This JS bridge have this bottleneck that is not really performant. Creating complex and custom UIs are pretty hard, are not fluent and smooth as in Flutter and in Compose, and it's still like in early stage, right? It's not even 1.0. So yeah, let's assume for our own mentality sake that we won't talk about React Native when talking about multi-platforms. So let's start about with Flutter. Are there any Flutter developers? Nice. So if you all have questions about Flutters, those 3 people are going to answer it because like I'm working with Flutter for a year. I created some UI, some logic, some etc. I'm going to be talking from like native engineer perspective, not Flutter. One question, have you started with Flutter or switched from like mobile development at all? Like iOS. Okay. Okay, that's nice. You have like pretty nice overview on mobile platform on multi-platforms. Okay. What's Flutter? Actually, it's multi-platform framework, let's say, which is created and maintained by Google, and it uses Dart. It's kinda JavaScript-ish language. It's pretty nice, not so bad as JavaScript. So yeah, so pretty nice. It's using custom rendering engine, and what does it mean? It means that it is not using the native components under the hood. So if Flutter is rendering your UI, it is trying to mimic the UI in its own like OpenGL, let's say. It's something like iframe, right? He's drawing its own UI elements on the screen. By that, it's aimed for 60 FPS. It's really smooth. The animations, the transitions are very smooth, and that's very cool. And what's the biggest part of it that I love is the hot reload. So basically, you can write the code, click Command S on Mac, and your changes are automatically applied to the code base, to the application. It's like magic. It's something that you need to check out. That's something we do not have natively on Android nor on iOS, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Unfortunately, there are also downsides, like big app size overhead. It's like 10 to 15 megabytes when app is built. And in my opinion, it's absolutely big for debug build. The app, the Busrite app that is live on production, it's around 100 of mega in debug when there is only like one feature in that, basically. It shows map like Uber where the bus is, basically. And half of that is Flutter, basically. So if you are running on some free storage plan to host your app to the QA, you might have a problem after several weeks. And it's mature. That's the very important thing. Flutter 1.0 was released in 2018. So community is big. It's really production ready. And many of apps you have probably installed on your phone is actually written in Flutter. Some small sneak peek how the Flutter UI looks like from the code perspective. Something like that. Actually, it's not really nice and clean, in my opinion. I'm pretty used to like native components, and no matter if you're iOS or Android dev engineer, something like that, so nesting tree of elements widget, is something very similar to what front-end developers are having in web development. That's not something that I was happy with, working with, because this complex UIs, you need to divide them by proper widgets to remember to pass all the parameters. The language itself is not also perfect for me. So, my opinion, it's not really easy to understand. It's not really convenient. Once again, my opinion. So let's move to the next part, the favorite part, hard. Yeah, it's Kotlin Multiplatform. So that's very similar approach to the Flutter. It's not using the native components on iOS because it uses the same rendering engine as Flutter. Well, it's pretty unexpected, but both of them uses Skia as a rendering engine. Obviously, it is baked by Kotlin as a programming language, and Android builds are super fast. We do not have like hot reload as in Flutter, but Android build is extremely fast. iOS is much slower, so I was depending mostly on building the Android apps and then checking if whole feature works on iOS, for example. No app size overhead on Android and small on iOS, so that's cool. It's not like Flutter with 15 megabytes of own custom libraries in it. But it's way less mature. Kotlin Multiplatform is stable in 2023, but Compose for iOS is still not in production-ready state. It's still in beta. And the community itself is also way smaller. So it's pretty hard to find, really nice libraries that's working across several Xcode versions, etc. But you can do that. Like the most core features like database, networking, etc. It's available and it's working pretty great. And that's how it looks in Kotlin Multiplatform. It's Compose. So how the UI is constructed there, it's just invoking the functions. And it's, for me, my perspective is very similar to Swift UI. It's declarative way of constructing UI, and it looks way more like natural and way more cleaner than on Flutter. Once again, my opinion. So, very short table with comparison about the Flutter and Kotlin Multiplatform. So rendering both, let's say it's no native, right? Actually, it's native on Android. And let me stop here for a second. Why I decided to assume it's a plus that native is at least on Android in Kotlin Multiplatform, because it has pros and cons. What does it mean that rendering is not native? As I said, it is redrawing components on its own. So imagine the case when new iOS version or on Android version is released and some component changes look, or some component is added. Those won't be accessible in Flutter nor Kotlin Multiplatform before those creators of those framework will introduce this change. So this means that actually you are not able to get the newest OS features as soon as they are available for the native developers, and that's con. That's for sure something that we want to avoid. But taking into consideration the fact that React Native was trying to convert its code to native components, and well, it wasn't working great because you had to translate the language, like component, literally to another one, and to build the whole tree by some kind of code generation. It's a big performance overhead. So rendering being non-native can be also a plus, like a pro and a con. So depending on your context, if you are building a small app, that most probably like native rendering will be something that you want, because you want to have like the newest components, the newest look, etc. But if app and UI is complex, having them rendered native is costly. So you won't be able to achieve like the smoothness of Compose or Flutter. So that's kind of depend on point of view. But having this native at least on one platform let's say it's a plus from Android developer perspective. Upsize overhead is like no-brainer. It's not good on any side. Maturity, of course, Flutter. Flutter is the bigger one, is the big player here. You can safely use it on production. And when it comes to language, well, Kotlin, obviously, that's a big note, so sorry. Still JavaScript, right? So Kotlin 2-to-1 to Flutter is the, let's finish this talk. Okay. We could say that, but let's take a look at non-biased version from like not Android engineer perspective. So actually, rendering can be a question mark, right? It depends on your use case. It depends on what you exactly need. Upsize overhead, still, it's no-brainer. Production ready is no-brainer, and language is obviously something you are gonna decide. Because if you are like me, from like native background, you will probably feel Kotlin better, like the syntax, this whole feeling, because it's very similar to the languages we are using, to the Kotlin, to the Swift UI as a toolkit. But if you are starting your journey and you are having experience in JavaScript, for example, or some other languages, you might find Dart a bit easier to do. So that's also something that you should consider when deciding on the framework. So actually, there is no winner, in my opinion. That's where you need to put your numbers by yourself. But I'm here to help you, and I'm here to help you choose what you want to do and what you should do. So in my opinion, and in my case, like from Busrate, you should choose Flutter if you are building more advanced applications. Like mostly because there is better third-party approach, better third-party support. There is better community, much bigger community, and it's a lot of easier to find some solution to existing problems. For example, like the whole toolkit of Flutter is very mature. Like adding dependencies is putting like one line in YAML file, and it just works. You do not have to worry about how to place the dependency inside Android, inside iOS. It just works, right? Choose Flutter if you were not a mobile developer. As I said, like Dart is most probably a bit easier language to just jump in. Maybe you are familiar with JavaScript, so that's gonna be like no-brainer. You just pick Flutter and hold the structure, hold the UI. Looks very similar to the thing you probably done on the web. As I mentioned, tooling is very mature. Like it just runs from your IDE. It can be Visual Studio Code. It can be recommended Android Studio. No external configuration is needed. You basically create run app and it runs. You have like profiler, inspector, version management. Everything is already done, and it's waiting for you to just click and start building the apps. If you are not willing, if you are not like early adopter nor experimenter, that's also way to go. Flutter is the safest option here. You just create the apps, you know it will work, you know it will behave like you want to do. But in the other hand, if you are a bit risky taker, let's choose Kotlin Multiplatform. But not only because of that. If you have mobile development background, it should be, I think, it should be your choice. Swift UI and Compose are very similar to each other. Kotlin and Swift are very similar to each other. Effort of jumping from native language to the Kotlin multi-platform with Compose is a breeze, in my opinion. And I think I can talk like this because I had multiple occasions when working with Busrate before we decided to rewrite the app to actually work with Swift. So I had to like fix bugs in native iOS code. to dig a bit deeper into like whole environment of iOS. And working with Swift was really easy. It was like I was just understanding it. And I'm pretty sure all you mobile iOS engineers will also have an easy way of knowing Kotlin, because those are very similar languages. Choose Kotlin as well if you do not need much third-party libraries. As I thought, like the tooling is not ideal, so if you want to integrate, I don't know, camera picker for both platforms, you are gonna have a bad time, yeah? Because most of that you have to know how Android and iOS dependencies management works like under the hood. So you will have to work with build Gradle, you will have to work with pods. So it's not ideal yet, but if you are endorsing modern technologies and willing to accept the earlier side, let's go for it. And there is this small asterisk here about earlier state of Kotlin multiplatform, because yeah, it's true. Compose for iOS is in beta, but actually Google supports it so much, and trying to bring Kotlin multiplatform together with Compose as the next big thing in multi-platform development, that it kind of seems that they are forgetting they have their own framework, the Flutter. So if you are gonna check the news about how Android Studio, for example, is prepared to Kotlin multiplatform, you heard from Piotrek that JetBrains stopped working on their own IDE for Kotlin multiplatform, right? Fleet, because they decided to go to partner with Google to develop the better toolkit. So my bet, and you can ping me in Twitter in December if that's not gonna be true, that we will have by December a stable version of Compose for iOS, together as pretty nice Android Studio improvements. And I think like hot reload and better dependencies management, the thing we know from Flutter will be also in Kotlin multiplatform very, very soon. So I would say in 2025, Kotlin multiplatform is a great investment, and it's great to start building your skills and start observing this whole ecosystem, just to be sure you can kickstart your next application in Kotlin multiplatform. So hopefully I will be updating those slides by the end of the year, but yeah, if not, don't blame me. And so when we should choose native? It's obvious, right? Quality and performance is your top priority. To be honest, if somebody would tell me that my bank application is using React Native, Flutter, or Kotlin multiplatform, I will be probably in bank changing my provider right now and trying to open my banking account somewhere else. It's probably not a great choice. As the similar case if your application uses hardware and native components. And the fun fact is, actually, somebody was, back in my previous company, in Software House, somebody sold project that was depending on Bluetooth Low Energy and communication without some small sensors to be done in React Native. Should I add that all the code responsible for communication with those sensors had to be written in native? Because yeah, the UI was in React Native, but hard logic and hard communication with those sensors had to be written natively. So please avoid projects in which you are relying on hardware, so Bluetooth, GPS, even maps. I will have like a small case study for that later on, and all kinds of sensors. Avoid any multi-platform solutions. That will be for best, believe me. The same if your application is to quickly adapt to newest OS features improvements. That's I was referring to when explaining the rendering process. If multi-platform solution is not using the native rendering, you will have basically to wait for new features, new improvements, new UI components. And I believe actually something like that happened in the bus rate, in the app we were working on. I've integrated Google Maps there. Yeah, application uses hardware or native components, big no, but we did that. Yeah, so we integrated Google Maps in our application. And Google Maps stopped working for some variety of devices. It wasn't rendered at all on Samsung S9, on few Xiaomi devices, Oppo devices, Huawei devices, but those were like random. S9, Galaxy S9 on Android 10 wasn't working, but was working with Android 11. And we were wondering what happened. And guess what? Flutter recently introduced new rendering engine. Instead of Skia, it introduced Impeller. And we bumped Flutter version on our CI. And when application was built with this Impeller, which was enabled by default since new Flutter version, everything was broken on prod. Because the new rendering engine has bug in it. And native views, for some conditions, I don't know why, and I don't know which phones are affected, stopped rendering them up. So we had a big trouble. And the bigger trouble was in debugging why it stopped working without any change. So if your application needs to quickly adapt to newest OS or use native components, let's go native. The security, yeah, that's something I already covered with the bank. So why we choose Flutter and Flutter for Buswrite, and why I chose Kotlin for my own app, and it's gonna be interesting. So in Buswrite a year ago, we decided that we want to go with some multi-platform approach. We didn't have any iOS dev. We didn't want to hire anybody. So cheap workforce. We have a new Android engineer. Let's make both apps. So I was doing a research. What should I choose? React Native, Flutter, or Kotlin Multiplatform? And a year ago, because it was something around May last year, Compose, Kotlin Multiplatform just went stable. It was around December. So that was still pretty new piece of tech. Like it's released 1.0, and the Compose was still in alpha for iOS. So that was a bit risky to implement the whole maps, whole the application in not major technology. We had one mission: to make apps better in every possible way. So choosing something that is not major was indeed not a good way to move forward. We decided on Flutter. We did a POC. We had very promising results. We integrated Google Maps. We released it on prod somewhere around December. Was it successful? No. No, mostly because I was doing it first time. That was my first contact with multi-platform. That was my first contact with Flutter. And probably I should tell them that it's not good idea to hire native Android engineer to do Flutter. But I learned a lot. I improved a lot. And we managed to do that. We have successful production with 40K users. It's working really smooth. Like those 60 FPS is not like marketing buzzword. It's so smooth. It feels almost better than native in some cases. Am I happy for the result? It was hard, but yeah. I was happy to such a level that I decided to go with multi-platform approach for my own application, for Whisketch. And I decided I do not want to do Flutter both in my like 9-to-5 job and after that. So I decided to go with Kotlin Multiplatform. I was willing to take a risk of Compose being in beta for iOS, for not having a wider community, for not having access to like third parties or something like that. The core was there, database, network, and it's working. Kotlin and Compose felt like very natural for me because, yeah, I was doing that for at least I don't know, 6 years with Kotlin or something like that. So it was so natural that I jumped into that and created writing the application. And now the state of Kotlin multiplatform is that it feels like creating an Android app that works both on Android and iOS. So if you're an Android engineer, it's no-brainer, just jump into Kotlin Multiplatform and Jetpack Compose, and it will gonna work, basically. So I followed my own rules, let's say here. I've chosen Flutter for bigger application. Tooling was important part for me, and the community and support for it was very important. I chose Kotlin Multiplatform for my application because I am tech enthusiast. I really like new technologies. I really like to work with Kotlin. So like my final choice, yeah, it depends. It depends on your use case. I'm not here to tell you that in 2025 it's better to choose Flutter than native. It won't be true. It won't be true if I will say that native is always the best. It's not. I've chosen my application multi-platform because it was easier than building both apps in parallel. So so you need to decide on your own. You need to decide if Kotlin is better than Dart. You need to decide if maybe you like React Native and you are very familiar with React. Go for it. But please do not be me like 1 or 2 years ago that when I was hearing about multi-platform, I was like, no way. I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to do that. Real apps are native, right? Because that's not true. In most cases, that's not true. And believe me, I'm not the guy to convince you for multi-platforms. Because if I'm gonna create my own app once again, and I will have to decide what to go with, just remember, absolutely nothing is better than Kotlin. So thank you so much. Okay, I think this is part for questions, right?
Yes. Thanks. Thanks for a really nice presentation, nice overview. I'm biased towards Flutter, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I'm looking forward to KMP taking some traction. Anytime at any conference, I'm gonna just join KMP talks just to see what's happening over the fence. I just wanted to maybe ask. Maybe just do a couple of remarks first and then ask a question about the KMP on iOS.
Sure.
So just maybe interesting fact about these debug builds that are so huge. This is quite interesting because you mentioned that the hot reload is so amazing. And the debug builds are so big because they essentially just carry entire Dart VM that allows you to just reload your code. It's like 20 megabytes or 30 megabytes, as you said. And the general overhead of production is quite low. However, the overhead typically is because when you're building an app with native libraries, for instance, Progress cannot tree shake or like reduce the size of your native libraries because it doesn't know which classes are used. So this is typically the reason for some size overhead. And also about the impeller and the issue that you faced. I agree with you that sometimes it's better to wait like a week or two after the stable release because things like that. And I agree with you that impeller on Android is still a little bit flaky. Like I also had these issues. So I think that's a good rule to have, to just wait 2 weeks.
Obviously, like I was like back then. I was just bumping libraries, you know.
I know.
That's something like.
I know how it happens. Yeah, like you're just in like.
So I didn't like that. That's probably totally my fault. Like I was just not expecting for Flutter to introduce such a big change without announcing it prior. Maybe I was not like.
That's a really good note. Like we as a community kind of bashed Flutter team because they were essentially setting impeller on Android as default too early, and that's like a community voice out there, and I think they will be changing that. And also, like, it's quite interesting why impeller was chosen, like because KMP is also running on Skia, and one thing that is, I wonder what's going to happen. Maybe you have some insight into that. Like, impeller was introduced because Skia was not dealing, for instance, with shaders on iOS and with platform views. very well. So one of the reasons just to avoid a lot of back and forth with Skia team was just to invent your own engine. So I wonder, like, if this will be, like, if KMP is also going to follow Flutter in this regard, because what is amazing about KMP is that they can just leapfrog a lot of the issues that Flutter has been facing in the last 8 years and just do the thing very well for the first time, which is quite cool. And this is where I'm going to my question. Do you know how platform views work on iOS in terms of the performance, in terms of fidelity?
How can in KMP, right?
Yeah, in KMP, like on iOS, can you put like a map view on iOS easily? How does it work? And how does it feel?
So yeah, I will be referring to the state of art prior like this year, so somewhere around June. And that was the main reason we have not go with Kotlin Multiplatform and choose the Flutter, because of support of the native and platform views. Basically, how it looked like, you had to create UI view, UI kit or Swift UI view, and communicate with that via some kind of bridge in Kotlin Multiplatform. I'm pretty sure it's now improved. Like it's hard for me to believe that people would pump Kotlin Multiplatform or hype Kotlin Multiplatform so much if that's not gonna be solved. But still, like Compose, it's in beta for iOS, so that might be a reason why.
Okay, in one bank in Poland decided to rewrite mobile application in Flutter, so you can,
Yeah.
I can actually correct you, it's free banks.
Free, okay, so free banks.
Only three are public, and many of them are still during development and under NDA.
Okay.
Okay. Do you know how? And because I was doing a bit of research, and maybe that will explain a bit, like extend a bit my concerns about the security, because why it's assumed not as safe as native is because in the application you have the Flutter engine code that if there will be a bug in it, it's a very easy attack vector for all applications using Flutter. So that leads to for example, to some issue in Dart change this renderer to impolar, and we cannot be sure in like version 3.28 it won't have any bug that will let you to remote code execution, etc. So if that's gonna be bumped like blindly as I did on CI, it's huge vector of attack, basically.
Like there was a bug in shared preferences plugin that allowed for arbitrary code execution in Flutter, because it was interpreting a string as a piece of code.
Yeah, so exactly. I'm not saying that stuff like this cannot happen natively. Obviously, it's happening, but in banks, I was working with one banking app. We had like very strict policy about dependencies. You cannot just go to the GitHub and pick whatever you want. It needs to pass the security audit, basically. For Flutter, if you are using the next release of Flutter, I doubt they are gonna do the Flutter audit each release, right? So that's the only concern I found actually in security point of view in Flutter. But yeah, I would be very cautious about that. But yeah, thank you for finding that.
Okay, I used working with Flutter, but some time ago, before the version 2.0, I think. But in those times, we need to use these channels and write some code in Swift and Kotlin. Now I'm Android developer, so yeah, Kotlin forever. And we try to implement some basic layers like networking in Kotlin Multiplatform, because we have application in Kotlin and Swift, but this Swift, it's some legacy code and technical depths, and we have problems with make sure to Android, to iOS developer engage with this process and to feel useful. I don't know. It's very complicated.
But you are referring to like only Kotlin multi-platform without the compose, so right?
For now, without.
Yeah, because that's something that I should mention before. But you can use Kotlin multi-platform without compose, so without the views. You can compile it and use in Swift native code as like third-party libraries, as a module basically. So I don't know how it's done, and I do not know how like teamwork and whole process should be organized around that. But I know that forcing iOS devs to write in technology that can kick them out from the industry is probably not the easy task to do. No, just kidding. I'm not trying to say that it's gonna replace native. Obviously not. But I had like the same concerns about Flutter and React Native. I didn't want to like leave my playground, and you know, I was feeling so comfortable in Android development, so I know what iOS devs can feel. And sharing code between Android and iOS and being platform agnostic is very hard. So you can repeat those schemas that you are trying to prepare code to be consumed for the platform you know, so for Android. And it can lead to the situation in which iOS doesn't work very great with those APIs, those methods, right?
It was last question. Let's give one more round of applause to Gabriel.
Thank
you so much.